Welcome. It's good to see you this morning. It's good to have our live stream crew join us. And you just saw the promo for Lights in the Village. Lights in the Village. Whew, it has been a weekend of Lights in the Village. But you just saw the promo for the Village Norristown. And a major part of their budget every year comes during the month of December and in our Christmas Eve offering. So consider that in your giving. That helps keep that ministry functioning and moving. That sure is appreciated. And we are in our teaching series, Manger Things. And it's about keeping the manger a major thing in our lives, not only in Christmas, but throughout the whole year. So the Christmas story, of many of the things that it tells us, one of the major themes that runs through the Christmas story is this phrase: promise made, promise kept. Now I want you to think about that for a minute. And if you leave with anything today, I want you to leave with that. Promise made, promise kept. You know, God is the promise keeper. And Christmas shouts to us, promise made, promise kept. One of the biggest promises, if not the biggest promise God made, is Christmas. And Christmas is a display that he kept his promise. All the way back into Genesis chapter 3 at the fall of humanity, when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the forbidden tree, you remember God's promise that Jesus would come, and he kept that promise. Through all the prophecies of the Old Testament, right? All the prophecies of the Old Testament about his arrival, about his birth in Isaiah chapter 7 and in Micah chapter 5 and the others. Boy, not easy odds. In all the prophecies that were made, the odds aren't in the favor of them happening, but God kept his promise. And you're aware of this. You know, if 8 of the 55 prophecies about Christ were fulfilled, do you know what that looks like? It is 1 to 10 to the 17th power. It looks like this. That's what it looks like. The odds of 8 of those prophecies fulfilled. Do you know what all 55 being fulfilled looks like? It has 157 zeros after it. But in spite of how the odds are against it, the odds don't matter to God. He made a promise and he kept his promise. Even through the 500 years of silence. I don't know if you're aware or not, but like when the Old Testament ends at the end of Malachi, what happens is there's 500 years of silence before Matthew chapter 1. And it's during that time period where Israel itself started to say, is God there? Does he hear us? Does he care? Is he sending help? Is the Messiah coming? And with all of the doubt that filled generations of Israelites at that time, Christmas shouts, promise made, promise kept. You know, Jesus is just like his dad. He is the embodiment of the promise of God. Right? I mean, you heard Jesus say himself in the scriptures. You've read it, where he says, if you've seen the Father, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And promise made, promise kept runs all through the life of Christ, even when he was here. Now, one such example of this is found in Luke chapter 8. It's not the only example. It's just the example we're going to talk about this morning. But it is absolutely an example of promise made, promise kept. And at first, when you hear the story, you're like, really? That's not a Christmas story. But it is a Christmas story. Because anytime promise made, promise kept happens, boy, that's what Christmas says to us. So in Luke chapter 8, the story reads this way. They sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and he fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him, and they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went into the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. So I want to go through a little exercise this morning to kind of illustrate promise made, promise kept. And I want us to see how from Genesis chapter 3 all the way through the Christmas to the life of the demoniac and even into our lives, when God makes a promise, he keeps it. It's a continuation. It is who he is. So you've probably noticed already, if you make a comparison between the condition of the demoniac and the condition of Adam and Eve in the garden after they sinned, you'll notice that their conditions are the same. Not by accident, by purpose. Right? They ended up in the same scenario. So you notice in Genesis chapter 3, the condition of Adam and Eve in the garden. Their condition was twofold. They were overwhelmed by the devil's temptations, and they were naked. They were overwhelmed by the devil's temptations, and they were naked. Right? The devil kind of made a promise to Adam and Eve. And the promise he made to Adam and Eve is, hey, if you participate in this forbidden fruit, if you participate in it, you're going to become like God. Well, you know, the characteristics of the devil is not promise made, promise kept. The characteristics of the evil one is promise made, promise not kept. I mean, Satan himself is a liar, and the evil one lies to us all the time. He tries to get us to buy into untruths. He tries to cause us to not be in our right mind. He causes us not to think the way we ought to. He causes us to deny the promises of God in our lives. I mean, he is not promise made, promise kept. He is promise made, promise not kept. And then you'll notice that not only were Adam and Eve overwhelmed by the devil's temptation, but then you'll also notice that they were naked. They realized their nakedness. Genesis chapter 3, verse 10. God came down into the garden and he's looking for Adam and Eve. And when God finds Adam, Adam answers to him when he says, "Where are you? What are you doing?" He answers, Adam does, "I heard you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid." Now you know the word naked in Hebrew is the same word as broken in Hebrew. So Adam looks at God and he says, "Hey, man, I heard you calling in all of your wholeness and all of your purity and all of your goodness and all of your completeness, and I realize I'm broken." Sin breaks us. Now notice the condition of the demoniac, right? The condition of the demoniac is exactly the same as Adam and Eve. Luke chapter 8, verse 27, we read this. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes. So here we have a man that Jesus runs into, and he is totally overwhelmed by the devil. He's totally overwhelmed by the demonic, right? I mean, man, the demonic is in him. He is overwhelmed, and he's knocked down, and he's controlled by the evil one. And he's not wearing any clothes, right? His nakedness had been obvious to all, and he hadn't been wearing any for a long time. His brokenness was obvious. I mean, the condition of the fall in Adam and Eve and the condition of this demoniac, I mean, they're the same. But just like God in the garden, another comparison in the story, just like God in the garden, Jesus intentionally goes after those who are overwhelmed and broken. That's what Jesus does. Right? He's just like, what? You're overwhelmed? Hey, I'm here. You're broken? Whew, I'm on the scene. Think about this. God in the garden makes a promise in Genesis chapter 3. He makes a promise, right? And in that promise, he keeps that promise even to the demoniac on the other side of the sea. He's helpless, he's rejected, he's overwhelmed, he's across the sea, and Jesus still goes after him. Do you know, Christmas is no accident. Christmas wasn't just some random day in which we decided, oh, we need to have a holiday to cheer everybody up and, and to decorate pretty things. And Christmas began long before the KOP mall was built and Amazon and, right? I mean, Christmas wasn't created so you would spend a lot of money. That wasn't why Christmas was created, right? Christmas is intentional. It's a purpose. It was God's plan to deliver Jesus to us. It is promise made, promise kept, that Jesus is coming after us, the overwhelmed and the broken. And the beauty is seen even in the story of the demoniac. In Luke chapter 8, verse 22, right, you see the intentionality of Jesus. Long before they ever get to the demoniac, this is what Jesus says to his disciples. One day Jesus said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side of the lake. So they got into a boat and they set out. Jesus didn't make reservations on a cruise. Wasn't an accident. He wasn't lost. It was intentional. Jesus knew who was on the other side of the lake. And he knew the promise made to the person on the other side of the lake. And not only did Jesus know, but so did others know. Luke chapter 8, verse 28. I mean, think about the beauty of this, and it is a beautiful thing. It says, when he, the demoniac, saw Jesus, he cried out and he fell at his feet, shouting in the top of his voice, what do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? I beg you, don't torture me. Can I tell you something? Jesus wasn't the only one in this whole story that knew he was coming. All of the demons knew Jesus was coming. They knew Jesus was coming. Promise made, promise kept. You want to know how they knew? Because the Father said he was coming. Well, you remember the passage of Scripture very clearly, don't you? It's in Genesis chapter 3, verse 10. Genesis chapter 3, where God, right after Adam and Eve sin and everything happens in the garden, then God says to the serpent, to the devil, he says, the seed of woman. Now, that's an important phrase. The seed of woman. Let me tell you why that's an important phrase. Because it identifies Jesus. Now you understand in Old Testament times and in New Testament times, just in all the biblical times, men got way too much credit. Are you following? I mean, right? We understand today it's different. I had 3 boys, and you know what? Nobody ever says, hey, all 3 of those boys are Dave's, and they negate Dora. Absolutely not. Right? I mean, man, those 3 boys are our boys, right? Together. They're our children. That's not the way it was expressed in biblical times. It would always be, hey, there's David, the son of William. They didn't say David, the son of William and Carol. They would say, hey, there's Zach, the son of David. There's Bradley, the son of David. There's Garrett, the son of David. They wouldn't say the son of David and Dora. So we've wised up, right? Men got way too much credit. But when God in the garden said, the seed of woman, what's he saying? Man will have nothing to do with this. I mean, I want you to know it's the seed of woman. It's Jesus, born, the Son of God. He's going to come, and here's what's going to happen, serpent. You're going to strike his heel, but he will crush your head. He's coming after you. He is coming. And they all knew he was coming. So like that day when the demons saw him and they expressed, "Oh no, don't torture us," and they collapsed at his feet, they knew the deal. They knew who he was. They knew his power. They knew he was coming. They know that God the Father and his Son are promise makers and promise keepers. They knew it. And here's the promise for you. When you're overwhelmed and when you're broken, he's coming for you. He is not going to leave you alone. He is coming for you. It doesn't matter where you're at or how big the sea is or how long the journey is. It is the story of God. It's who he is. He is coming for you. Not accidentally, on purpose, he's coming for you. And in fact, here's a beautiful part of this story also. It doesn't even matter how many issues you have. Right? Because we say that, when I'm visiting with people are like, "Oh, I'd like to believe, but you don't understand all the issues I have." It doesn't matter how many issues you have. I mean, it really does not matter at all how many things you think are wrong with you, or how broken you feel, or how many pieces you're broken into, or how overwhelmed you are. You realize that does not negate the promise of God. In fact, in this story, we're told this in the scripture. Like, think about this. When Jesus looks at the demoniac and he says to him, "What's your name?" Why do you think he asked the question? Do you think God didn't know? You think God didn't know what his name was? Do you think God didn't know the activity that was happening in this demoniac? Of course he knew. But the reason he said, "What's your name?" is so that everybody else would know, that it could be recorded, that you and I could know today. So when he says, "What's your name?" and the reply is Legion, because many demons had gone into him, it tells us something. Now, anybody want to take a guess what Legion means? What does Legion mean? Anybody take a guess? Yep, it's a number, very big number, right? So a legion is right. It's a Roman military term that's used. A legion of Roman soldiers has somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 soldiers in it. So when you think about this demoniac, you said, "What's your name?" Legion. I have a lot of issues. There's a lot of stuff broken in me. I have more, at least I can list 3,000 issues that I have in life. Man, and I'm telling you, I could have 6,000 issues in life. Man, I've been broken by what's been done to me. I've been broken by the choices I've made. I've been broken by my own selfishness. I've been broken by other people's selfishness. I've been broken by the circumstances in life. There are thousands of pieces crushed to smithereens in me. 3,000 to 6,000 issues, at least. Man, the demoniac was dealing with a little bit. And it doesn't matter how many issues you have. You may be overwhelmed. You may be swarmed under. Man, you may be broken into smithereens. It does not negate the promise made, nor the promise kept. So one of the things that happens in this story, right, the major thing that happens in this story, is that Jesus transforms the demoniac into a new person, just like he does with us. And so you look at the demoniac's position. His position in this story doesn't only shift. I mean, there's a huge change in the demoniac. Right? When we first meet the demoniac, what do they say about him? When we first meet the demoniac, man, he's naked, he's wild, he's in chains, he lives in a graveyard. I mean, man, you look at his condition and you look at the shape that he's in and you look at everything that surrounds him and you're like, whoo, wow. I mean, most of us would look and say, I'm not even going to try. Right? I mean, man, he is so far gone. But then you know the story, right? The demons go out of him and they go into the pigs, and the pigs go over the cliff, and the people that were in charge of the pigs, they run to get the people that own the pigs and the town fathers, and they bring the town fathers, and this is what it says happens when they show up. Chapter 8, verse 35. When they came to Jesus, they found the man from who the demons had gone out, and they found him, and they named three things: sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed, and in his right mind. Now I want you to know every single one of those statements, they're significant. Every one of those statements is telling us something that has shifted, that has transformed in the demoniac. Like the first thing is he's sitting at Jesus' feet. No longer is he overwhelmed by the evil one. No longer is he swept under. No longer is he submitted to. No longer does he follow. No longer does the evil one have control of him. Amen. He sits at the feet of Jesus and he is submitted to Christ. Huge difference in his life. No longer is he drug around and beat up. He sits at the feet of Jesus. Previously, he couldn't even fit, right? He couldn't even sit. I mean, they chained him up. They chained him up to try to keep control of him and try to like keep him in a spot. And they put guards over him, and they just couldn't do it. He was everywhere, but no longer. He is submitted to Christ, and this is a big deal. He's dressed. Remember how when we found him, when we first heard of him, he was not worn clothes and hadn't worn clothes for years and years and years? Now he's dressed. Now you know the significance of being dressed, right, in this passage of Scripture and throughout the whole Scripture. Whenever it makes a significant point like this, it's not like Jesus says, "Oh my goodness, man, we got to get you an outfit. You know, you're naked. Let's go to the KOP mall and I'm gonna pull my MasterCard out and we're gonna get you like a set of clothing so you quit running around here naked," right? Obviously he was dressed in real clothing, but that isn't even the point of being dressed. This would be a great word study for you to do. Look through the New Testament, and whenever you Google the word, whenever you Bible search the word clothed, see what the Scripture says about it. You're clothed in Christ. You're clothed in peace. You're clothed in strength. You're clothed in righteousness. And they show up, and not only is he submitted to Christ, but his spiritual clothing has completely transformed. He is wearing a whole new outfit in Christ. And then the final phrase, he is in his right mind. He's in his right mind. You know biblically what it means to be in your right mind? To be in your right mind? It means you're free from guilt and sin. You're free. I'm in my right mind. Do you know, obviously, right, there's some sort of understanding that when we're actively involved in sin, we're not in our right mind. There's something that's not correct about us. And what happened in Genesis chapter 3, right? What happened in Genesis chapter 3 is that God created mankind, God created humanity so that we would point up towards him and we would point out towards others. That's the way he built us. That's the way he created us. But in the fall and in this being overwhelmed by the temptation of the evil one and believing a lie, they consumed that forbidden fruit. And what happened was we were broken. Where we no longer pointed up, we pointed down. And we no longer pointed out, we pointed in. And we became selfish, and we became self-centered, and we became full of guilt, and we became full of selfishness. And man, to be in your right mind means, hey, you know what's going to happen? Man, we're going to be bent up and we're going to be bent out. And no longer are we riddled with guilt. No longer are we riddled with sin. No longer are we riddled with, there is now a rightness that comes from Christ to us. We're in our right mind. We no longer believe the lies. We no longer act on the lies. We no longer are, right, man, there's a rightness about who we are because of Christ's activity in us. Promise made, promise kept. Now there is something about this story that I really want us to get. There's a lot of miraculous things in this story. And there's a lot of fantastic miraculous things, like big, earth-shaking miraculous things, right, in this story. And I don't want us to miss the application for us. But one of the miraculous things is that Jesus is even there, right? That God became flesh and he was there. And it's sad that we've kind of gotten used to that. It's kind of sad that in today's day and age we get used to the phrase Emmanuel and it doesn't feel like a big deal to us anymore because it's absolutely miraculous, right? That's one of the miraculous things that's happened. And then there's another thing that's taken place. It's almost this scary movie goosebumpy effect of the demoniacs, the demons speaking. And you're like, oh, right? It's almost like, whoo, that's big, that's fantastic. And then the biggie of Jesus, right? Whew, man, and they're in the pigs, and then the pigs are running, and they fall over the cliff or into the lake, and you can imagine that scene. Oh my goodness, with like right, they're not stopping, and they're running in, and they're drowning, and it's just it's a big scene. It's dramatic. And then even before he arrives, right? Even before Jesus arrives on the other side of the lake. He says to his disciples, hey, let's get in the boat. We're going to go to the other side of the lake. There's somebody over there I have an appointment with. When they're going across the sea, like right before we read about this, you know what happens. The storm comes, right? The winds are blowing, the waves are crashing, the disciples are afraid. They don't think they're going to make it. And then Jesus stands up and says, be still. And it goes, whew. Wow. The displays of the power of God. I think this. If we're going to be overwhelmed in life, why are we overwhelmed about the stresses of life? Why are we overwhelmed and knocked over and saturated and run over by the problems in life? Like, why aren't we overwhelmed by the power of God? I mean, if we're going to be knocked off our feet and go, oh my goodness, I'm immobilized, why aren't we immobilized by the very power of God? I mean, that's something worth being overwhelmed by. And yet, but I mean, man, there's so many things, right, that you look at here and you're like, whoo, wow, there is so many big, dramatic things. And here's where I'm going. I don't want you to miss the intimate and the personal in this story. I don't want you to miss the man sitting at Jesus' feet in intimacy and a personal nature. I get it. I'm this way. Drawn to big stories, right? The more dramatic, hey, right, the more interesting the story. So, I mean, hey, right, we're drawn to folks that, man, they've been so deep in, they've had so many issues, there's been so much brokenness, man, the tragedy in their life is so overwhelming, it's huge, and then we see God's activity and we're like, yeah! And rightfully so. I mean, God does incredible healing and huge traumatic stories. Absolutely. We ought to applaud that. But you know what I think sometimes the side effect is? I think the side effect is, well, God hasn't done that for me. I don't have some big traumatic story. My life's been it's been more normal. And so like we hear this story, we read this story, and sometimes we go, I don't even know how this applies to me. Well, I want you to get this. You know what is as powerful as him calming the storm? You know what is as powerful as him sending those demons into the pigs? Is that transformed fella sitting there at his feet, taking in all he can of Jesus. It's not about the flash. It's about promise made, promise kept in your life. You know, it's not like, well, that person, their sin was greater than my sin, so they're broken into more pieces. Man, we're all broken. We're all broken. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Every one of us. It's about promise made, promise kept. And I mean, it doesn't matter if you have thousands of issues in your life, or if you think you only have one or two. Man, being broken is being broken. And I want you to hear this. God, the great promise keeper, from Genesis chapter 3, through the millenniums of the Old Testament, through the calling of Abraham and the Exodus of Egypt and the Elijah on Mount Carmel and Daniel in the lion's den, to the city of Bethlehem, all the way to Jesus in the manger, right through the demoniac and right through all of world history. He has come for this intimate, personal moment with you. That's the big miracle, is that God sees you. Even as perhaps as insignificant as you might feel, God sees you. God loves you. God made a promise to you, and he's keeping his promise to you. Man, Jesus extends this promise made, promise kept for your very own life. And that's what Christmas says. Every time we come to Christmas, we're like, whew, God made me a promise, and he kept it in Jesus. And yeah, it's this big, grand story. And there's been big, huge activity throughout history. But just as big as all of that is my own intimate, personal relationship with him. Just as big as all of that. Promise made, promise kept. So here's my question. Are you having those intimate and those personal moments with him? He's made the promise. He's kept his promise. Have you received his promise? Are you living into his promise for you? You know, this morning, I just want us to give an opportunity to make a decision that we're going to live into that promise. That we're going to receive the promise of God that was made and fulfilled in Christ for each one of us. For today, for the big picture of eternity and eternal life, and for moment by moment. So if everybody here, if you would bow your head and close your eyes for just a moment. I'm going to say a word of prayer. And it's going to be about receiving the promise of God through Christ in our lives. For all of eternity, his forgiveness and his grace enacted in our life, and for day by day and moment by moment. And I'm going to encourage you that if you have not had that personal moment with the promise maker and keeper, that you receive it right now. And it will ring in the heavenlies as big as thousands of demons flying over the cliff. Jesus, I believe you are who you say you are. I believe that you died on that cross for my sin. I believe you walked out of that tomb alive. I believe that you are the fulfillment of the promise of God all the way back to the creation of the world. I believe this. And right now in this moment, I receive your grace and your love. And I turn from the lies. I turn from the incorrect thinking that I've participated in. And Lord, I turn to correct thinking. And Lord, where I'm in error, man, continue to correct me. But in this moment right now, Jesus, I receive your great grace. And Lord, I pray that if I've been absent of those intimate personal moments that you desire with me, that right here and right now, I make a commitment to have those moments, to recognize your presence, to know that no matter how big the issues are and how overwhelmed that I feel, that you are with me, that you come after me. And in the midst of whatever is taking place, I won't put my eyes on the circumstances or the stuff. I will look through all of that to see the promise keeper coming after me. We love you, Jesus, and we praise you. Thank you. Thank you. In your name, amen.